Love to have you guys on the show. It's fun. I love having guys like Pete on to talk about fishing, but I really enjoy having the scientists on every once in a while too, and just getting a different perspective on the fishery.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Tell us about what you're working on. Now, you did some seminars this weekend on lake trout tagging and tracking. Tell us about that.
Yes. So there's a project going on right now, tagging and tracking lake trout in Lake Ontario. So it just kickstarted spring of 2023. Little backstory for your listeners who might not be familiar with Great Lakes lake trout. There's been restoration efforts going on for upwards of 50 plus years. So trying to bring back lake trout after they were extirpated for a whole gamut of reasons. But so trying to bring back that population. We've succeeded in a lot of ways. When we stock these fish, they live to be adults, they grow big, but the problem is that they're not reproducing in any great numbers. So they're not creating a population that's self-sustaining right now. So this project is trying to figure out what the heck is going on.
Yeah. So what are you doing to do that?
So we are tagging these lake trout with acoustic tags. So it's these. The concept is very simple. You pop a tag in a fish, you can track how it moves around the lake. But these tags are fancy and really, really cool. So the scientists perform a small surgery and implant the tag right in the lake trout's stomach. These surgeries are super quick, happen in under 2 minutes, right out on the water. The tag itself is communicating a unique little sequence that identifies that fish as that particular fish. And Lake Ontario right now is lit up with receivers on the lake bottom. These receivers are listening devices, so they're out there in the deep listening for the siren song of lake trout chirping. And when they hear those individual lake trout, they can record a timestamp and they record the location.
Okay.
So from that, we, as part of this project, are hoping to figure out spawning locations. So we know we have a lot of historical records about where lake trout are spawning, but as I mentioned, this is a totally different variety of lake trout because we don't have the Lake Ontario strain lake trout anymore. So we need to know in real time, where are these fish going? So with this huge acoustic receiver array, they call it, with all these different listening devices down on the lake bottom, we can figure out where our lake trout in Lake Ontario are going in the fall to spawn. And from there, we'll be able to kind of hone in on some of the characteristics. What are they choosing for their locations? Like, what makes it a good spot that the lake trout like? Is it something about the substrate, the fetch? So there's a whole bunch of different variables that we want to dig into. But we know that habitat is likely a key issue in why our lake trout aren't able to reproduce effectively.
So is this part of the GLaToS?
Yes,
right?
yeah, it's
With
part
Chris?
of the GLaToS
With
network.
Chris V, I call him.
Yeah, he's kind of like the man behind the computer.
Right.
Yeah, yep.
Okay. I'm familiar with that from Lake Erie.
Yes.
Talked to Chris before and tapped him. He sent me some PowerPoint on the Lake Erie movements.
Yep. So
in and out with,
same concept.
with all the receivers and the whole it's the GLaToS thing. So it's kind of neat. It's a neat project.
And it's really cool because it just leverages the power of collaboration. So like these bits of technology, we know it can get expensive fast. So different agencies, this is US, Canadian, academics, they're all maintaining different parts of the array, different receivers. So together we can really get a good picture that would have otherwise not been possible.
So these receivers are constantly receiving this information. Now, for you to collect that, do you have to go and pull the receiver out, or can you just drive over and kind of?
No, so you need to physically collect the receivers.
Okay.
There's a lot of them.
Yeah, there's a lot. So it's a huge effort.
That's is it November, early December when they get pulled?
It depends on the agency.
Okay.
But
There's a
yeah,
lot.
so yeah.
Have you ever seen the network of these?
I've seen the maps
aerial
in Erie.
map?
Yeah.
There's a lot.
Yeah, so if you go to the GLaToS website, you can look at the project maps and it'll just show you the receiver array for Lake Ontario. It's incredible. It's like fully covered.
I believe they basically drive over top them and they hit basically the release button and they come up.
So
That's
some
right.
of them have a release, and some of them they actually grapple for with like a big old grappling hook to
They're
pull
going
them.
fishing for it.
Yeah, yeah. So depending on the locations, some of the in-river locations, like folks that are working in the Niagara River, have a harder time of things because the flow they're dealing with. Some of them have to be retrieved by divers.
Which agency actually goes and retrieves those?
All different agencies.
Okay.
So, New York State DEC, U.S. Geological Survey,
They'll-
Fish and Wildlife
they'll-
Service, CFO.
Because there's a lot. That's why I asked you. There's so
Yeah.
many of these, and they're all over. So
Yeah,
I think there
exactly.
was more than
So
one
the-
boat going around.
the
here.
power of teamwork gets it done.
So how do you go about getting the fish to put these in?
Well, so this was a really fun part of the project. So they used a whole suite of different gears. They bottom trawled to collect lake trout. They set gill nets. And my personal favorite was contracting charter captains to hook and line angle for them.
So our mutual friend was involved with 3 or 4 of those missions this year out of Wilson area.
Yes, was that Captain Casey?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually was down there when I saw you guys leaving on probably 3 of those voyages. But I understand you guys had a couple rough trips out there catching them.
Out of Wilson, possibly. So I wasn't on the boat those days.
I think the migration kind of started early.
Yeah.
They weren't as prevalent as if it was like 2 or 3 weeks earlier.
But out of the east end, when I was aboard, we were working out of Mexico Bay, and it was a match made in heaven being able to hook and line catch them because the fish were out really deep. When you're catching them, you were able to regulate how quickly you're bringing them in, the number of lake trout that you had on the deck to perform the surgeries, and it's their job to catch fish, and they're really good at it.
Yeah.
So how many do you feel are in the Great or in Lake Ontario swimming? I know that the transmitters, you don't know if the fish was caught or it died, right?
So
How many are active ones? Or
So they put in 320 tags so far, and another 150 are going in this spring. Yeah, so they're actually able to, based on how the tag is communicating, you can kind of see which ones are dead because the tag will just be stuck in one spot. Yeah. And we had 3 folks call in a tag. So we had a 1% return rate from people catching the tag.
Are they the bright tag? Are they bright orange, I should say?
So these the tag that is the acoustic tag is an internal tag
Right.
in their
The
belly.
transmitter.
Yes, and then all the fish were marked with an external and orange tag.
Orange ones, right?
Yep, that's called a Floyd tag. Those aren't going to be retained for the whole project. The fish will shed that eventually. But
Oh.
for now, these are 10-year tags. So because the lake trout live so long, we're going to be able to collect some really interesting data from these. So if you do harvest a tagged fish, there's a number on it where you can call and report it and return the tag. And scientists are really interested to know catch rates.
We had a guest on, I think it was yesterday, that caught a tagged fish, and they're like, we caught it exactly where it was tagged. It was a month later.
So I'm gonna pick Mr. Special Guest 3 over here.
Okay. Trevor is
Is it-
sitting in the background here.
Trevor, is any of this ringing a bell?
Yeah.
What happened?
Which? On the tag?
Yes.
That was on your boat.
So he was doing a camera shoot on my boat
Probably 5.
5 years ago.
Yeah.
And one of the lake trout we caught had one of those. It was a
tag.
transmitter fish.
Yeah.
And had the big orange one, which I knew all about this already. But
Yeah.
Did you call it in?
Yeah.
Okay. But we caught one while he was doing a shoot on my boat in Lake Erie.
Oh, that's
Which is
great.
pretty neat. And you talked
Yeah.
about this.
And to be able to share with viewers.
Pretty neat.
Yeah.
We took a lot of pictures of it. It's neat.
So what have you learned so far? It's a pretty new study here, but what have you learned so far?
Well, we haven't learned anything so far.
Nothing. You
Yep.
sound like
So
little kids.
well,
I always
I mean,
ask
that's-
them, what did you learn at school today? Nothing.
the potential is infinite right now. So it was interesting though. While they were out there catching the trout that they were going to put tags in, they did encounter more presumed wild fish than we anticipated. So I think it was upwards of 25 presumed wild. So that's based on the fact they don't have that metal coated wire tag. They don't have any fin clips. and they don't have any kind of like telltale signs of a fish that was in a hatchery, like that fin erosion, kind of beat up snout. So we did manage to tag a fair number of presumed wild fish, so we'll be able to make some kind of like off the cuff comparisons of how hatchery fish are behaving and how these presumed wild fish are behaving. We also collected genetics information that we can get, the strain and the sex of the fish. So we'll be able to see if the males and females are behaving differently or different strains.
That was something that, I think we had Steve Hurst on yesterday, and Steve was talking about the DNA project that the New York DEC is doing on salmon right now.
Yeah.
So is that, the technology of that, and when we think of DNA, we think of like, solving murders and things like that. How has that DNA technology come to the point now where we can just use it on fish?
Yeah, I mean, it's some incredible advances, and the fact that some of the cost has really come down on a lot of these things and has made it more accessible to use. When you're talking, you need a sample size of hundreds and hundreds of fish to be able to like really decisively answer your questions. And there's some cool lake trout genetics projects going on too, that are like next level. You might have to invite the geneticist on to dig into it. But folks are looking at it. Not necessarily the parentage-based tagging that Steve was talking about.
So one of the other, I was talking to Jay Wesley from Michigan a couple weeks ago, and he was telling me, so they're bringing the Arctic grayling back to Michigan, and some of the things that they've been doing, they've been just trying to plant these fish and haven't been very successful. So what they've done now is they're growing the fish in hatcheries, but instead of planting fingerlings, they're just planting eggs. And they're seeing that in the western states as being very successful. So they're trying that this year in Michigan. Is that something that you think that you would look at it in New York? Is it, instead of going out and dropping fingerlings in, they're just dropping eggs?
I think probably not, just because the habitat is what we're thinking is so bad right now. So some kind of preliminary camera work and some analyses looking at the substrate, the bottom of the lake. Some of these historic spawning areas where it used to be that pristine cobble where the eggs could like plinko down and rest safely from egg predators. They'd get all the sediment brushed off them. All of those are filled in now with sediment, with dreissenid mussels, the zebra and quagga mussel shells. So really, if you were to try to seed those areas with eggs, they're just not going to make it probably.
Has there ever been any discussion on same program with king salmon?
There's probably some folks have done tracking with Chinook salmon, but not to this scale.
Not on Lake Ontario.
I think there were a few like experimental like satellite tags, but not like a large scale project like this.
It'd be neat if they did.
Yeah,
Really
the
neat.
potential is there, and
Really
with
neat.
having an array out like this, it's not project specific. So tagged lake trout are working with those receivers, tagged lake sturgeon, walleye. So there's a whole bunch of different projects going on.
You're doing how many next year or this year?
So this year it's going to be 150-ish tags.
Think we can split the difference and get 75 kings tags?
Yeah, I'm not the one to talk to.
It'd be very, I mean, obviously this is a king salmon driven lake, really. I mean, I granted lake trout are, say, they're a protected species nature.
Yeah, because our goal is restoration here.
Restoration,
Yeah.
right. We need to see the tracking. We need to track king salmon. See what they did throughout the lake, back and forth across the shores, east, west, the whole thing. Where they winter, things like
And
that.
it's
It'd
cool
be very
because
neat.
some of the tags that we used in these tagged lake trout, they actually have pressure sensors in them so that you can see in the water column where the fish are moving as well. It wasn't all the tags, it was just a smaller subset, but that'll be really interesting to see too.
How much do these fish move around in the lake? How much, like, how many miles do they cover?
We haven't dug into the data yet. Lake trout are sometimes thought of as homebodies, kind of like sticking within their port, but I predict there'll be some movement.
Well, you got a bunch of notes here. We've got about 2 minutes left. Is there anything from your notes that we haven't asked you about that you wanted to cover before we let you go?
I think we touched on everything, and then I just wanted to emphasize for any folks that encounter one of these tagged fish, the importance of calling in their catch and sharing that tag number, because it's really contributing to the science, and we need the anglers out there.
So obviously the orange tag you said dissipates after how long? One pin.
So I'm not exactly sure, but that it's not built to last.
So they have to obviously creel the fish at that point in order to find the transmitter.
Yes. Yep.
The tag's gone, right?
Yeah. So this is if someone is harvesting a lake trout, you'll be able to see it when you cut it open.
We got a question here from Jim, and this is a good question. The lake trout stocking, what strain are they currently stocking in Lake Ontario?
They're still stocking a mix of strains, predominantly Seneca.
Okay. Is that kind of thought of as the closest to what we would have had originally here? Or?
I don't know if the closest. Through time, they've done quite a bit of experimenting with different strains, and based on the conditions that we have in Lake Ontario, the presence of sea lamprey, those ones were seeming to do the best. But that's still ongoing work as well.
Very cool. Well, awesome. We appreciate you stopping in. We appreciate the work you're doing, and hopefully you can be more successful. And maybe next year we have you come back and you'll have some of this data, because I think it'd just be interesting to see how much they move around the lake, and maybe it's not at all. Maybe they just hang out. But do you think they'd move around with the bait?
Yes,
Observation.
definitely. And especially when it comes to the fine scale movement of when they're spawning and what areas they're going to. I'd be happy to come back and share that.
Awesome. Well, thank you. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much.
You're excited about your work, so I can tell.
That's when you have a job that doesn't feel like a
I
job.
can tell. Thank you.
Great. Awesome. Good work.
I didn't even
Stacy
know.
Furgal. Yeah, we knew you wouldn't.
Well, thanks again.
Awesome. Thank you.